Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. Welcome to the second episode of the Learn About Limerence series. This webinar is called What is the Difference Between Limerence and Similar Experiences? Thank you all very much for your interest in this topic. My name is Rachel Wood, and I am the founder of a ministry organization called Lord Over Limerence. If you'd like to learn more about the organization, I encourage you to watch the first episode of this series, in which I give a brief overview of the organization as well as a primer for what Limerence is. You can also visit our website at lordoverlimerence.org. I consider myself to be a limerence survivor, which is why this topic is so close to my heart. Some other key things to know about me are that I'm an electrical engineer by occupation, singer-songwriter with a passion, and I try to make people happy with the little things in life. We have a pretty short and simple agenda for the presentation today. I'll first compare limerence with several other similar experiences, then talk about certain psychological phenomena that may be associated with limerence. Before I dive into the similar experiences, I'd like to give a brief disclaimer. I am neither a psychologist nor a neuroscientist. There is a good deal of merit to studying limerence from the perspective of both fields, and being a proponent of abnormality in general, I am especially interested in the abnormal psychology involved. However, this presentation is focused more on the emotions of limerence than the science. And that's true of Lord Over Limerence as an organization as well. With that said, let's look at some of the experiences that may be confused with or are closely related to limerence. I'll start with the crush. Crushes are very familiar in today's world, but bear with me as I attempt to frame them with a little structure. A crush is romantic attraction that is fairly superficial, often based on physical qualities or a fascination with the unknown, a desire to unravel the mystery, so to speak, about the other person. Very commonly, it starts upon the first meeting between the crusher and crushee. Because of it, excuse me, because of its superficial nature, it is usually very temporary, fading within a few weeks or months, either as they get to know the person better or giving up pursuit due to outright rejection. This type of romantic attraction is hardly even worth comparing to limerence because limerence has so much more profound of an effect. As Dr. L at livingwithlimerence.com wrote, crushes tend to come and go with little psychological impact. However, limerence is sometimes confused with a mere crush, so I'll put it this way. A crush barely scratches the surface of one's heart, while limerence pierces deep into the core of a person's heart and soul. Infatuation is similar to a crush, but it takes the attraction a step further. An infatuated person obsesses mildly over how to get closer to his or her potential love interest. Some key words he or she might say are, I daydream about him or her all the time. In addition to those daydreams, an infatuated person often spends time and energy planning ways to win the other person's affection, such as displays of grandeur or trying to showcase their talents in their love interest presence. As is the case with a crush, infatuation typically lasts for a short time, dissipating after a few months, either as the two become friends or rejection occurs. Compared with limerence, the difference comes down to the level of desire versus need. An infatuated person may say something like, I gotta have this guy or girl, because they desire the pleasure of the other's company, but they don't literally mean they need to be with that person to live. By contrast, a limerent person truly feels like they need reciprocated affection from the other person to feel fulfilled and that life is worth living. I thought this quote from Lucy at Neurosparkle was worth including. In the linked article, she refers to limerence as infatuation, with which I disagree from a definition standpoint, but her note about connections to certain psychological disorders was interesting. She writes, I am aware that virtually every single person on this planet feels certain things strongly and irrationally, but a limerence really is at the top of the scale in terms of intensity, especially since mental illness is usually thrown into the mix. Nearly every single person who I have seen who has fallen into a deep infatuation has been on the spectrum for severe depression, bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, or OCD, meaning they could obtain a psychiatric diagnosis for one of these illnesses. A few slides from now, we'll take a look at those disorders in relation to limerence. Unrequited love. Another unfortunately familiar experience for most of us above the age of 16 years or so. Unrequited love, or one-sided love, is romantic affection for another person that is unreciprocated or unreturned. The person who has been rejected in this way usually, understandably, feels sad or disappointed. Sometimes, if there was once a mutual love relationship between the couple, the unrequited lover may feel shocked or betrayed if the rejection seemed to happen suddenly. Questions that may cross his or her mind are, why can't he or she love me back? Or I really thought he or she was the one. Generally, there are two main responses to unrequited love. Number one is to accept the rejection and move on. Number two is to hang on to the one-sided love for dear life, because the thought of being without that person would be worse than dying. Limerence is often shown by that second response. Though the rejection is extremely painful, any hope that one day the limerence object will change his or her mind can prolong limerence. Person addiction is a life-dominating emotional attachment to or dependence upon a specific person. It mimics addiction to substances such as alcohol or drugs in that it normally starts with voluntary consumption. In the case of person addiction, that means spending time with the person. And gradually it feels like all self-control is lost. It becomes extremely difficult for an individual with person addiction to separate his or herself from the person, and great distress and anxiety is felt in the person's absence. Someone with person addiction may think or say, I can't or don't want to live without him or her. In relation to limerence, person addiction may develop from a more stable experience of limerence as an individual becomes more dependent upon the limerence object for fulfillment. Love addiction is strong attachment to or high dependence upon the feeling of romantic love, not necessarily associated with a specific person. Characteristics include insecurity and a feeling of deep dissatisfaction without a significant other to meet his or her felt need for love. Something a love addict might say is, I could never be happy being single. Love addiction is distinct from limerence in that it is not necessarily experienced toward a specific person. Limerence, on the other hand, is very much directed toward one person at a time. Now, we'll direct our focus to certain psychological phenomena as related to limerence. Beginning with obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD, it is a mental disorder in which people experience unwanted and repeated thoughts, feelings, images, or sensations, obsessions, and engage in behaviors or mental acts, compulsions, in response. Common characteristics are intrusive thoughts, significant discomfort such as fear or anxiety, and large amount of time spent on engaging in the compulsive actions prompted by those thoughts. OCD manifests in many forms, including checking for problems such as an unlocked door, burning stovetop, or proper grammar in writing, fear of germs that results in cleaning everything rigorously, need for orderliness in the home, or hoarding. Some thoughts that may come to mind for a person with OCD are, I have to make sure this is clean. That's not how it's supposed to be. It should be this way. And I can't throw anything away because I might need it later. Individuals with OCD likely experience intrusive thoughts about their limerence objects to a higher degree. They may also try to control situations to gain their limerence object's affection. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, is a mental health condition that develops in response to experiencing or witnessing a distressing event involving the threat of death or extreme bodily harm. However, anyone who has survived a deeply disturbance experience of any kind can develop PTSD symptoms. People with PTSD have vivid memories of their traumatic experiences and are hypervigilant to any perceived threats. They often have nightmares and feel fearful or anxious in any situation because at any moment something bad could happen again. Because of their preoccupation with their own fears, they may feel apathy toward others, as well as emotional numbness and pervasive feeling of discontentment in life. In some cases, they go so far as to withdraw from normal activities because they want to avoid any reminders of their traumatic experiences. Whatever the experience might have been, they live with the constant thought, I can't go through that again. PTSD might be experienced by an individual with limerence either before or after limerence due to fear of relived experiences with abandonment, neglect, or abuse. I'm not entirely certain whether or not I can say I had PTSD in my limerence, but I did fear rejection intensely, and when it happened, it was very traumatic indeed. I became emotionally numb and apathetic for several months and felt haunted by dreams day and night. Next is bipolar disorder, which is a chronically recurring condition involving moods that swing between the highs of mania and the lows of depression. Because of the mood swings, it is also known as manic depressive disorder. In mania, a person will exhibit high energy, extreme optimism, irritability, boosts in creative output, talk unusually rapidly, be very distractible, often behave recklessly, and deny that anything is wrong in their lives. When feeling depressed, they will feel hopeless or empty, sleep more than usual or be unable to sleep, show a loss of interest in hobbies or other activities they once enjoyed, may have a change in appetite, and think frequently about death or suicide. In the best of their manic episodes, a person with bipolar disorder will think, this is the happiest day of my life. By contrast, the worst of the depression may cause them to lament, I've never felt lower than I do right now. In limerence, similar highs and lows are often experienced, where euphoria is felt when one's limerence object appears to return their affection, and severe depression when the limerent person feels rejection. The term highly sensitive person was coined by Elaine Aron in her 1997 book, where she referred to those people who have high levels of sensory processing sensitivity. Psychology Today says those with high levels of SPS display increased emotional sensitivity, stronger reactivity to both external and internal stimuli, be it pain, hunger, light, or noise, and have a complex inner life. A highly sensitive person reacts very strongly to stimuli, whether physical or emotional, because they are deeply offended by criticism, have frequent mood swings, and need a long recovery time after being offended, even very minorly. They are often labeled as too sensitive by others. They require alone time every day to prevent themselves from being overwhelmed or overstimulated. Some keywords or thoughts of a highly sensitive person might include, "Don't you understand how much that hurts me?" Or, "I need to have alone time every day." A limerent individual who is also a highly sensitive person will experience heightened intensity of limerence due to his or her higher sensitivity to the limerence object, words, or actions. The last psychological disorder I'll include here is borderline personality disorder. Psychology Today's definition of borderline personality disorder is a condition characterized by instability and impulsivity. The term originates from being on the border of psychosis. Those with the condition seem to have a different sense of reality. Defining characteristics of BPD are an intense fear of abandonment, outbursts of anger, erratic behavior, extreme mood swings, and self-harming. According to Psych Central, it can be difficult to distinguish between BPD and a highly sensitive person. However, one key difference is that a person with BPD will not be discerning as to whether or not they have an angry outburst in public. But a highly sensitive person will reserve this kind of behavior for a more private setting with trusted individuals. People with BPD may perplex friends and family members by praising them with words like, "You're the best," one minute, and then berating them with, "You are the absolute worst," the next. A combination of limerence and BPD in an individual may lead to stalkerish behavior. In rare cases, some limerents may have hallucinations or delusions about their limerence object's feelings. Now that was quite a lot of information, so let's review a few key takeaways. First, limerence is closely related to, but distinct from, similar experiences, including crushes, infatuation, unrequited love, and love addiction. However, if unchecked, it can develop into person addiction. Also, limerence may overlap with an individual's experience with OCD, PTSD, bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, and the individual may be a highly sensitive person. Any combination of limerence and these disorders makes a limerent person's life more difficult, especially when they are not well supported by friends and family members. Every experience with limerence is unique, but one thing that is clear from each one of them is that limerence is a very complex interplay of psychosocial factors. We'll look more closely at what causes limerence in the next episode of this webinar series, coming up on June 10th. I hope to see you there. You can refer to this slide for the registration link to the webinar episode on what causes limerence. Remember, if you are unable to attend the live session, you can still register and receive an email when the recording is available to view. With that, I want to thank everyone again for joining. I hope you have learned and/or resonated with some things. If you think of any questions, my contact information is on the screen, so please feel free to reach out as they come to mind. Thank you very much for listening.